welcome. Today we're going to be looking at Sizzix Bigz dies, and we're going to be talking about what makes them so unique in the world of die cutting and looking at some of the creative applications which they lend themselves to. Now let's look at the dies themselves. They come in many different sizes, including standard Bigz size. We have Bigz L dies and also Bigz XL dies. Now let's just talk a little bit about the anatomy of a die. Firstly, the blade is set in a wooden block, which is then encased in rigid plastic, and finally the foam is attached over the top. Now this protects the blade, but it also protects your fingers and allows you to eject the shapes once they're cut. So let's have a look at a die in action. So we're going to take our die and we're going to place the card or the material we want to cut against the face of the die. Then we simply make a sandwich by placing this between our two cutting plates from our Big Shot Plus machine, slide it into position, and then simply turn the handle. And when we turn it over, you can see that we've got 7 beautiful cut shapes. Perfect. Now, because we're working with a deep steel blade, which is very sharp, we can cut through multiples of different materials. For example, I've got some standard card here, which is folded into 6, and I'm going to place that against the small flower die. Now, always bear in mind, it depends on the intricacy of the die and the thickness of the material, just how many multiples you can cut. But I'm going to place that again between my two plates, wind it through, and even though we're cutting through 6 layers, there's hardly any pressure required. That's because we've got a very deep, sharp blade. Now, I'll take that out, and here we have it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beautifully cut flowers. This is perfect if you're making a batch of cards, for example, or if you're quilting, or maybe you need to cut lots of the same shape all at the same time. Now, not only can you cut through multiple layers, you can also cut through some very thick materials, because as we mentioned, we're working with a very sharp, very deep blade. I've got some here. We've got thick felt, place it over the small flower. Mount board, placed over the large flower. And this is a piece of cardboard box which I took from the warehouse on the way here today. So we'll place that over the leaves. Now, I'll take my cutting plate, make my sandwich, and we're going to attempt to cut through all 3 of these at the same time. So we'll wind that through, and we're cutting really thick materials here, but there's hardly any pressure at all. When we turn that over, we've got a thick mount board flower, a lovely little felt flower, and there's our cardboard box. Perfect, crisp die cutting every time. Okay, here's just some of the materials that you can cut using a Bigz die. We've got thick felt, we've got leather, tracing paper, and I think there were about 12 pieces there, all cut at the same time. Cardboard box, which you've just seen. Shrink plastic, we'll be looking more at that later. Mount board, balsa wood, magnetic sheet, cork, fabric, and that includes denim, it includes very thin fabrics as well. We've got craft metal and craft foam. Now, we usually say you can cut whatever you can cut with scissors, so this is really just the tip of the iceberg. Now that we've seen some of the kinds of materials that you can cut using a Bigz die, you can see that that extra cutting power allows for far more versatility, and that opens a lot of doors to some creative applications which you may never thought of before. All of these projects by the side of me here have been created using one single die. So let's take a look at how we get from this to these. Okay, we'll start by looking at paper crafting. As you can see here, we've got a couple of cards and a nice layout. The die cut shapes on this card are stuck down flat, whereas on this card we've used tweezers just to add a little more dimension to the petals, and we've curled the leaves slightly so it helps them stand out against the background. With this one you can see that we've used 3D foam pads just to add that little bit of dimension, and in the background you can see that I've die cut the shapes in the same colour, so that gives us sort of a faux embossed look. Now next we want to talk about stenciling and stamping. You can cut through craft foam, as we've seen. You can also cut through mount board, but when you put the two together you can make your own disposable rubber stamps, and then we simply dip them into acrylic paint, apply them to whatever we want to decorate, and I'm sure you'll agree the results are pretty cool. Now stenciling, as you can see here, we've just painted this with bits of white paint, and we've used separate stencils to create this blobbed effect. And then remember at the outset when we die cut our single piece of card, well, that's all I've used to get this wonderful stenciled effect, just putting it in place and just blobbing through there with a foam applicator, different colored acrylics, and again a lovely little piece of artwork which would adorn any wall at home. Okay, let's take a look at some of the things that you can do with textiles. First of all, felt. Bigz dies cut through many layers of felt. It gives such a beautiful crisp cut, and you can see here we've made this lovely embellished beanie hat. Very simple technique to make this sort of multi-dimensional flower. First of all, I'll cut 4 of these individual flowers, then I'll fold it in half again, and I'd usually gather this with a stitch, but I'm going to use my tiny attacher just to pop a little staple in there. And as you can see, there are 3 that I've done already, and I simply place this, and it's on a round piece of card. Again, if we were going to sew this onto something, this would be a circle of felt, but I'm just going to place that in there, and that is the basis for our flower. Then we take 4 of the daisy shapes, again all cut at the same time, and repeat the process as before, and simply place those in the center. Finish off with a few die cut leaves and a diamante gem. Now, using a similar technique, we've created these flowers on these lovely pair of shoes. Now this material is actually buckram, which is a very thick, very dense sort of fabric, lovely to work with, and underneath you can see is hessian. Now to get that kind of bowl effect with the hessian, what I did with the die cut shape was take this and cut it into the center. So I'll take my scissors, make a cut like so, and then to make a dimensional flower we simply fold one over the other like that. So when you attach this either to a paper crafting project or something with textiles like this, it gives you that lovely bit of added dimension. Next up, we've got this lovely hairband. And the beauty of die cutting is, of course, is you can always match your colors to accessorize whatever you're wearing. So whether it's for a bridesmaid, or if you're going to the races, say, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, this is the sort of thing that you could do. And we've got some voile now. This is a lovely fabric, and you can cut, I think with this I cut 16 layers at once using this die. Now with a more intricate die, obviously it would be less, but what we're going to do is we're going to layer 3 together overlapping and do the fold as we did before. Now at this point what I would usually do is light a candle and hold this just above the flame to give that lovely crisp edge, and it gives it this extra dimension and it makes it look more naturalistic. Now finally we have this t-shirt. Now I started off by creating a template, so I drew a heart on a piece of paper, cut it out, and then attached it to the t-shirt with a few pins. And you can see here these are some templates that we've made for t-shirts that we're going to be creating later on. So there's a letter S, so you can make initial t-shirts. This could be anything you wanted it to be, really. But the lovely flowers that we've added there is simply gold lame. And again, I cut about 12 of these pieces at one time. It's a lovely material. And we folded it in quarters, then gathered it with a stitch and attached these individually through the template, making up whatever shape you want. So let's take a look at our final 3 projects. Firstly, this lovely little brooch. You can see it's been cut from 2 pieces of thick felt, and they are held together with a lovely blanket stitch and a few little beads in the center there just to bring it to life. And you could match the color to your moves or whatever outfit you're wearing as well. Then we're going to look at this bag. I love these little flowers, and they're so easy to make, and you're probably wondering how we make those using the die we looked at before. It's very simple. Simply take one of these large flowers, die cut from felt, and then I'm going to just snip into the center, and I'm going to move the flower. The scissors are staying exactly where they are, and I'm cutting in a spiral motion from the outside into the center, like so. Then I'll take my tweezers and simply roll towards the center until we make a perfect little rosebud, and you can always gather that with either a stitch or a blob of hot glue there and attach them individually to your bag. It's a lovely little idea there. Then finally we have our jewelry. Now this is a pair of earrings. It could equally be a charm bracelet, or it could be a ring, or any sort of trinket. And these are actually made from shrink plastic, so they started life much bigger. And this is the plastic, the kind of plastic that we use. This is frosted shrink plastic, and we die cut the shape to start with, like so. And we'll show that against the white card so you can see how I've inked this and rubber stamped it. At the top you can see where I've punched a hole, and then we simply used a heat tool to reduce that in size, making it much thicker, much more rigid, and it's ready to go. There we have it. I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of what you can do creatively using these dies, but I hope that's given you a taster. So thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want any more ideas or inspirational tips, why not go to the blogs or onto our website.